Hello, and welcome to another episode on the Money Minds podcast. Welcome to the 46th episode. I'm your host, Yash, and in today's podcast episode, we will be talking about a savings account and where you should be opening one from. So, before we do that, let's talk about a savings account. So, a savings account is essential and serves a key importance in one's finances because it allows a person to separately save for something that they may need cash for in the future. And this could include saving up for a down payment, a vacation, initial investment amount into a stock or any other sort of type of investment, and or any other things a person may need to save money for. When saving money, there are essentially two accounts that you can save this money in. So the first account would be an RSP, which is a registered savings plan. And essentially, this account can be opened at a bank or credit union for saving. So, for example, things like housing costs, some people might choose to save them in an RSP. Now, the other savings account would be known as a TFSA, which is a tax-free savings account. This account, it allows you to grow your savings tax-free. Now, it's also important to keep in mind that growing your savings with interest may be the better option just because your money grows over a certain period of time, depending on the interest rate, which we'll be talking about next. So, when opening a savings account, it's important to make sure that the interest rate is competitive and good in today's market. So, in order to understand that and get a better idea, you want to look at the current interest rates that are going on in the market, specifically for savings. We do have interest rates at an all-time record low for mortgages to say, but those rates are different compared to savings rate. In order to do this, you have to compare the rates from major banks and credit unions in order to see which rate is the best. Now, if you were to open a savings account from one of the five major banks, the interest rate would range anywhere from 0.0010% to 0.00550%. Now, as you can see, these rates are extremely low, and your savings would, at this point, they would increase by a cent, over a year-on-year basis. But, that's not really good because that's not going to grow anything in the portfolio. You want to make sure that you're finding a good interest rate by discussing with different credit unions or even banks to really see what they have to offer as well. These interest rates will take you nowhere in today's marketplace because your money wouldn't grow much. Now, if you look at the same compared to credit unions, they offer a more competitive and better rate in today's market. So they offer an interest rate of anywhere from 1.15% to 1.25%. So when you're looking at these different calculations and rates, so on the high end you can get 1.25%, which is good. So you're almost getting around 1.24% higher compared to the banks. Now, you want to make sure you also want to look at, if you're getting a higher interest rate, what are the other disadvantages from a credit union? You also want to see how they're going to protect your money, what services they offer, and, overall get a great idea of, if this savings account is right for you. Because, even though it has a high interest rate, there may be other things that could be drawbacks. So it's important to look at those things as well. Now, where should you open? Let's talk about this next now. So essentially, this question gets asked by many people a lot. And, so where should you open a savings account from? Now, if you want a good interest rate on your savings account, then a credit union may be a good option for you. But it's also important to look at what services or features that the savings account offers and what other information the company may be able to tell you prior to opening the account. So essentially, you want to talking to an advisor at the credit union or bank, and they should be able to give you an estimate as to how your savings would grow, which gives you a better idea as to how fast or long it will take to reach a certain goal. Now, obviously, before you do that, you want to make sure and sort of look at, how much money are you willing to put away for your savings. That could be initially, that could be set up with automatic deposit. All these various things are factors that need to be taken in order for you to make sure that the savings account is the right fit for you. And you also want to look at, how much, if you invest, obviously if you invest a greater amount of money, it will grow more, but you also want to look at what you're comfortable with. And you also want to see whether you should be investing that money and maybe you could grow yet even a higher rate of return. Now this all depends on your own financial situation, but the point of this podcast is to educate general things about a savings account, which are looking at rates and various other things as well. Now, in order to grow your TFSA faster, another way would be trying to invest a partial amount of the money while also making regular deposits to the account, which will help the value of it increase faster. So let's look at an example now. So suppose I want to set up $400 of automated payments in my TFSA. Okay, so I've set the $400 a month payment and it's going through into my TFSA account at a good interest rate, and then I decide that I'm going to take a partial payment of that, a partial investment of that, and move it over into my investment account, and use those $200 and invest that. So now I'm also investing $200 in my TFSA, so that's growing, and then I have another $200 as well that could grow to around $250, or it slowly could grow and gradually also help, and then you can cash out if you're interested in selling and sort of profiting off the gains that you may have received. Now you also want to. Now, overall, when opening a savings account, you want to make sure that you have three things in place. The first thing is the interest rate. Make sure that it's good and competitive within the market. The last thing that you want to do is not have a good interest rate and then, your savings are not really growing, because then, inflation is going to rise in the future as well. It's already rising. Things are already so expensive. In order for it to be less expensive for you, or to be on the good side of inflation, you want to make sure that you're investing and saving your money the right way. Now, the second thing that you want to look at is make sure you understand the terms and conditions of when you can withdraw the money. This is something very big that you want to keep an eye on, just because you want to take a look and see, when I will be able to withdraw this money. And then based on that, you can make some more financial plans. So essentially, suppose you're trying to save up for a down payment, and you've saved up for it within 2 years. Now, you want to make sure that after those 2 years, you would be able to deposit the money, because you do not want to be paying a fee on top of that money, because then that's just going to reduce your savings and increase your expenses rather. And the last thing is, make sure you understand the terms and conditions of when. Okay, we have already mentioned that actually. The third thing is, do your research and look at the best option that suits your needs. And this is very important as well, just researching on the web, on Google, and sort of getting a general idea of what your sort of areas, credit unions or banks to say, offer at its most competitive rate. Now, savings accounts have been around for so much time, but you also want to look at various other things as well. And you can also look at other money market accounts that also offer better rates or even better services, for example. And you may also get various other things as well. Now when you look at different banks and even savings accounts. So let's look at how savings accounts work. So savings accounts allow you to keep your money in a safe place while it earns a small amount of interest each month. These accounts usually require either a low minimum balance like $25 or may require no minimum balance at all. So you also want to look at what the minimum balance that you have to invest or keep in that account is. And this is something that would be discussed within the terms and conditions, and you sort of have to maintain this at a certain level in order to be charged with no fees. I would assume that you cannot leave a savings account empty once you open it. That's pretty obvious, but so essentially these accounts usually require either a low minimum balance and then the bank pays you interest on that money that you deposit and leave in that account. Now, if you invest how much, now you may be wondering, suppose I invest $1,000, how much interest will I get that on in a year? Now, if you were to put away a bigger chunk of money, you'll earn more interest. So saving $1,000 a year, you may end up with only $1,000.10. Now, if you were to put the same $1,000 in a high yield savings account, you could earn about $5 after a year. And so, it is slow growth, but that's why you also want to look at, what the average return you're getting from an investment. Maybe, an index fund might be a better option as well. So these are all things to discuss with a financial advisor to go further into this topic based on your own financial situation. But, in general, in this podcast episode, we discussed about savings accounts and what you want to look for overall, and, the two different types of savings accounts as well, and how you should go about opening one too. Oh well, this wraps up the 46th episode on the Money Minds podcast. If you learned something new, share this podcast, and remember that all information provided in this podcast is for educational purposes only. Please be sure to do your own research before investing or opening any account anywhere. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for another new episode coming out next week.